Uganda and the Democratic Republic of Congo have launched a joint operation to try and defeat militants within the borders of the two countries. And to discuss the latest developments from the DRC, we're now joined by a senior researcher for West Africa in the Africa Conflict Prevention Program at the Institute for Security Studies, David Zounmenou. Thank you so much indeed for joining us. Always good to talk to you.
Thank you, Peter, for having me.
All right, so the borders of these two countries, DRC and Uganda, have always, in fact, I won't say always, but for a long time, had these militant problems. And one was never really sure where these militants were coming from. Was it inside the DRC? Was it Uganda? Do both countries have problems with militants on either side?
Look, Peter, when we're talking about militants, we are referring to the Allied Democratic Force, which is a group originating from Uganda back in the mid-1990s and established itself in the DRC, and since then launched a kind of terror attacks on the population in that area. The various reports of organizations have proved that recruitment took place in Uganda, and most of the leadership originated from Uganda. So to be able to, for the DRC to be able to tackle that problem head on and to eradicate that phenomenon, I think there have been many recommendations that both countries need to work together. One, to stop the recruitment process, and two, to be able to prevent the militant from really taking refuge in on the other side of the border when they feel the military pressure launched by the DRC military establishment. And this is what is happening since October 2019, when the DRC has decided to take war to the ADF.
All right, so you talked about recruitment. How is that done typically, and how would a joint force be able to stop it?
Look, what we've seen is that people are lured into the DRC on the fake promises. Recruiters in Uganda may ask them to come to DRC to work in the mining sector. Some of them are promised to go and teach Islamic teaching in the country. And before they know it, when they arrived in Beni, they were taken straight to the camps, given military training, offered weapons and machetes, and asked to go and wreak havoc in the area. And that's why we're seeing since 2019, almost 1,300 people have been killed in the hand of that particular group.
All right, so what nature of work might these armies do that they haven't been able to do? What will they be able to do together, do you think?
I think the key is simply to be able to attack or to tackle the leadership, which often sought to get back to Uganda when they feel the military pressure. Two is simply to tighten the border, particularly DRC Kasindi border, where these militants use to cross into the country. And three is to continue the investigation to destabilize or to destructure the supply network that exists between the two countries. But we shouldn't be fooled by saying that the problem of ADF is only between DRC and Uganda. Research has also showed that militants have been recruited from Burundi, from Rwanda, even from South Africa, and simply lured into the fight into the DRC. So in addition to that cooperation with Uganda, they also need the possibility of cooperation, particularly intelligence sharing with other countries whose citizens have been found within the ranks of the ADF.
I was about to ask that as the next question, because there are other countries, South Sudan, Zambia as well, that are borders with the DRC. Would they also need to have some input, or are those borders relatively safe?
I think the most dangerous border here is between DRC and Uganda, and because of the reason that I just cited a while ago. But this said, intelligence gathering, intelligence sharing, information sharing between the DRC and its neighbor country will help military to try and improve its strategies and know exactly where to hit hard to weaken the group and to address its region's capacity, which is affecting the security in the North Kivu.
There are so many militant groups in DRC on the borders with these countries that you mentioned, Uganda, Rwanda, Burundi. And I just wonder if trying to help Uganda with their issues on the border with the DRC, are we missing out on the other militant groups that are spread there, some of them that have actually even split away and formed their own?
I think that the reason why the government has decreed the state of siege from the 3rd of this month and allocated exceptional powers to the military in both North Kivu and the Ituri province to take all-out war to those various groups, armed groups, creating problems to the civilians in the North Kivu and the Ituri. I would say that the ADF, feeling the pressure from North Kivu, has now tried to seek safe haven in the Ituri province, where also a number of armed factions have been fighting for the past years. So I think dealing with the security, taking the war to the armed group, yes, we need the military might, but I think it also would need a comprehensive strategy which looks at the root causes of the problem, both in North Kivu and in areas affected by the activities of particularly in the Rushuru province, in Walikale, in the Masisi, and other parts of the DRC that remain under the control of the armed groups.
All right, well, let's talk a little bit about those root causes, because we have to learn lessons, I guess, from the Sahel and maybe even northern Nigeria, that military might alone is not going to be enough to deal with militants.
Yes, I think the key structural problem that you can find common to most of the instabilities across the continent is the lack of governance, the inability of the states to project power beyond the capital cities, of the inability of what we call the security forces to have the control of the territories and to protect the civilians. And that is also seen in the DRC. In addition to that, I think many local problems have been neglected, particularly conflicts related to land issues, access to power. Some of those issues have been neglected so that local communities have to fight basically to make their voice heard, and this is a problem that needs to be addressed. Economic opportunities have been scarce as well, opening the doors for young people to seek to join the army or to join the armed group only for survival purpose. And I will add that particularly since we're talking about the DRC, we are witnessing the recycling of combatants who might get into the DDR process, the demilitarization or demobilization process, but without finding a clear structure or a coherent structure to absorb them and accompany them into the social reintegration process. And all those issues need to be addressed to simply support or maximize the gain that the military will achieve in this operation that they launched against the armed group across the country.
Do you have any confidence that this joint operation will actually bear fruit? If one considers that the DRC doesn't have a small army, but they've really struggled to manage the militancy in their country.
I think it will be misconceived to believe that the military operation alone will bear fruit. At the end of the day, this is not the first time we see joint operation by neighboring countries to tackle armed groups in the DRC. The key question here is, one, how do you preserve the areas that have been recuperated from armed groups? Two, how do you continue to sustain the effort in terms of logistics, in terms of means, in terms of salary to the military to continue doing the job? 3, how do you put in place local mediation processes that help to tackle local root causes of a conflict in the first place? How do you make sure the political governance structures respond to or create the opportunity for people to express their will, to have influence of those who are governing them in Kinshasa and elsewhere? So I think all those questions need to be addressed to make peace lasting and sustainable in the Congo.
Citizens have often said that they have no confidence in the military and the government in wanting to deal with this issue once and for all, almost suggesting there may be some complicity with some people in the military.
Evidence exists that there have been some collaborators within the security apparatus in the DRC, some of the military officers providing weapons, ammunition, and other resources to armed groups, either to get money or to defend a particular interest. And I think when President Tshisekedi took over, he made a promise that he's going to clean the army from those collaborators. That exercise is vital if citizens have to get new confidence into their security officers.
And I suppose the issue of minerals is one that makes this even trickier, because one can talk about ideologies and so on and so forth, but when there are minerals up for grabs that can yield funds, it's going to be hard to break this.
I think that's a challenge for the DRC, because there is a variety of reports that identified military officers who are involved in the exploitation of natural resources in the DRC, using the proceeds to maintain their group. For example, we're talking about Mama Yakutumba. We're talking about the Nduma Defense of Congo, Renové, NDCR in the Walikale. It is known that the leader of those groups have acquaintances with military officers, continue to benefit from their support, and continue to export the natural resources abroad. So there will be a need for justice to have a look at what is happening there. There will be a need for the state to really take those issues very seriously if they want to re-establish the image, the honorable image of the security forces, particularly the First Army de la République démocratique du Congo, the FRDC, which has also been accused of violating human rights and abusing civilians.
In the meantime, what is happening every day, particularly Eastern DRC, to civilians? Does atrocities continue to be perpetrated by these militants?
From the report that we are receiving, I think the military is trying to neutralize the so-called negative forces, dislodging them from their camps or their hidden places. But the movement will continue because it's too early now to assess whether this have an impact on the security arrangement in the country. Some civilians have started returning to their villages or to their houses, but others continue to be victim of retaliation while the armed groups for trying to flee. So it remains to be seen. But the state of siege also comes with some limitation to citizen rights, freedom of expression, freedom of movement, freedom to protest. And I think all those freedoms have been put on hold until they see clearly into what's happening in the Ituri province in the North Kivu.
Sometimes what happens when you deal with crime in one area, all that it does is it moves to another area. Could this then bring in even more countries? I know you talked about Burundi and Rwanda, but could this problem move rather than be dealt with?
I think that's where the common regional strategy is key here. Because dealing with insecurity, crimes, and other things in the DRC could not be only given to the country alone. DRC is surrounded by 9 countries, all of them affected by security issues, particularly Rwanda and Burundi. So there will be a need for a coherent regional strategy to accompany the national initiative taken by the DRC. And this is key to prevent what you're calling the displacement of crimes or violence from one point of the country to the other, including to the border of those countries that we just mentioned.